Welcome to Solo Travel TV. This is Yogita Ridgley, founder and CEO of Traveling with Me, Myself, and I. Today, I have a beautiful lady who is very well traveled and almost like an expert in solo travel, you could probably say. And she is going to share all her stories and her journey with us. Welcome, Danielle. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good in this crazy time of unknown travel.
Now, let's start with if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, Danielle.
Certainly. I grew up in regional Victoria, so in a very, very small town called Dimboola with about 1,500 people. And my family were very conscious of travel. We had lots of family that lived a long way apart. So we did a lot of road trips. As a kid, I travelled up to Queensland. My very first trip, I was in a bassinet in the back of the car as we travelled up from Victoria up to Queensland in the car. So I've been a traveller basically ever since I was born. But the real travel bug bit when I was 12 years old, and my mum said to me, "Oh, would you like to go on a trip these summer holidays to Singapore?" And I said to her, no, I've got my friends, I've got sports, I can do all these fun things in the summertime, I can go to the pool. And she said, "Oh, but there's shopping." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, yes, of course." So herself, my grandmother and I went on a 3-generation trip to Singapore for 10 days. And after that, I have travelled overseas nearly every year since, maybe sometimes even twice or 3 times. So yeah, I certainly was bitten by the travel bug when I was quite young.
That's really exciting to hear because I love stories when, people are kind of like born into traveling. You definitely are one of them for sure. Now,
Yeah.
if you don't mind sharing your very first solo travel journey, what got you started on going on solo travel journey?
Yeah, for sure. Well, my very first solo travel journey, I was actually only 14 years old. And I went on an exchange program to the US. So I was going for 6 weeks, and I ended up getting allocated to a place called Roll, Arizona, which is a tiny, tiny little place on almost the border of Mexico and Arizona. And I lived in it with a family who lived in a trailer.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a really unique experience. And I was very lucky that the mother of that host family was a Hopi Indian. So I had the ability to go onto the reservation and learn some of the Native American traditions. And her father was an elder and very well-respected artist. And I learned so many things about the traditions of the First Nations people there. And it was a very unique experience. I went to school there, which was, again, very different. I played basketball there, which is one of my passions. So that was really one of my very first sort of independent, I guess, travel experiences as a very young age. But then as I got older and I became, I guess, an adult, my very first, I guess, big solo thing was I backpacked around the world for 12 months. So I started in Australia and we went to Samoa, and my aunt is Samoan. So the first leg of our journey was as a family trip. So my grandma, my aunt, my uncle, my 2 cousins, my mum and stepdad, we all went to Samoa for 2 weeks, and we rented a ute and we all loaded in the back, and it was sort of an arm wrestle sometimes, whoever got to sit inside if it was raining or who had to sit outside. And we did 2 weeks family tripping around Samoa. And then for the rest of the journey, they all came home to Australia and I continued on. So I went to Canada, I went to the US and spent about 3 months there. I went to the UK and I worked a little bit, travelled around Europe, went down into Northern Africa, went up into Scandinavia, came home via Asia. And it was the most liberating, amazing experience, and I would highly recommend anyone that, when they finish high school or university, to take that gap year if you can, because you learn so much about yourself and about traveling and about everyone else and the world and just being a good human.
Absolutely. I love that. That's an amazing message. It changes you as a person. And normally for most of us, it changes you into a better person. And I love the idea of you actually having that authentic experience with the native Indians in US. And as a 14-year-old, that must have been quite different. You know, a 14-year-old growing in countryside Australia to being on on a reserve in US. What was one of the things that you learned in that space that had changed you to be a better version of yourself in that experience?
There were lots of things I think I learnt at that point. I grew up in quite an Anglo-Caucasian sort of regional city, and going into a really diverse school with people from all over the world speaking a range of different languages and accepting different cultures was a real eye-opener for me. And I grew up in a family who are very open. My family have always travelled, and we've always taken exchange students and been quite worldly. So I was very open to that, and that made my experience, I think, even more enhanced, because I learnt some different languages. I studied a little bit of Spanish while I was there. I learnt about the Mexican culture as well, because we were so close to the border. I learnt about the First Nations people. So I think it taught me to be open and understanding and to listen and hear people's stories, which is really special, and is the thing that I value so much in travel is the stories and the experiences. And I think it also taught me to be brave and to step out of my comfort zone, because a lot of those things I had never done before or seen before, and yeah, it was really, really quite challenging. But as a 14-year-old, I guess you have a little bit less fear. So I just threw myself into everything and tried everything and had an amazing experience, which I think has set me up for all my future travel.
Yeah, excellent. I believe that, one of the most important things is to literally travel with open mind. That's like extremely important if you really want to embrace all the different cultures, and if you want to really embrace all these different things different places have to offer for you. Now, the next question for you, this is probably going to take you years to answer, but maybe just one or two little tips on this one. What's one thing that you love about solo traveling?
Oh, yeah, there are so many things I love about solo traveling. Probably the biggest one, I love that people talk to you, because when you're in a 2 or a 3 or a group, you've got someone else to talk to. So no one sees a need for you to be spoken to, or there's no compulsion for anyone to speak to you, or you to need to speak to anyone else as well if you're traveling in a group. But as a solo traveler, you're almost forced to socialize and communicate with others. So I think that's something that I really value from solo travel. And I've had so many amazing experiences, and I have plenty of stories of benefits that have come from solo travel. I met one of my very best friends, who is a friend for life. I was in Spain. I was reading a book on the doorstep of a Spanish flamenco dance school, and I was sitting there reading my book, and it was obviously in English, and a lady walked up to me and she said, "Oh, are you waiting for the flamenco show?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And we got to talking, and she said, "What are you doing traveling on your own?" And I said, "Oh, I'm backpacking around the world." And we had a beautiful exchange, and her and her husband were working. They were from the US, but they were working in Germany at the time, and they were on holidays in Spain. So we watched the show together, and at the end she handed me her email address, and this was before social media and before smartphones and everything. She handed me her email address written on a little piece of paper and said, "By any chance, if you're ever traveling through Germany, I rattle around in this big home while my husband works. If you'd like to come and stay, please do."
Wow.
So I emailed her because when I was planning my trip through Germany, the train went straight through her village. And I thought, well, this has to be fate. So I emailed her and I told her, and they picked me up from the train. We had an amazing week together. I stayed with them in their home. They spoilt me. I had my own bedroom, which as a backpacker, you never, ever have your own personal space or personal bathroom. They spoilt me. They were a lot older. They basically treated me, I guess, as a daughter. At that time, I was in my early 20s. And ever since, we have communicated by snail mail, and that was almost 20 years ago now. So I've now visited her 3 times in the US. I've taken my mum to visit her, and I know her family. And yeah, we've become best friends after meeting on that one little instance. And
Yes.
yeah, I have hundreds of stories like that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely gorgeous story. That I really relate to that. That's one of the very best part of solo traveling, is that you do have to get out of your comfort zone to talk to other people. And then when you do, it ends up being a friendship that lasts for a lifetime. And I,
Mm-hmm.
just like yourself, I'm pretty lucky as well. I have friends all around the world that every time I go to any certain country or town or village, I can go visit. And again, they get to
Yeah,
see you as
great.
well. Absolutely. Now, as always, all the great things also have some negative notions attached to it. What is one thing about solo traveling that you don't like?
One thing I don't like. There's not many things I don't like. One thing I do miss when I'm solo traveling is seeing someone else's reaction to things and being able to share the experiences. I have visited New York 5 times now, and the first time I was on my own, and I went to Times Square and I did all the Statue of Liberty and all those amazing icons that you sort of dream of, and loved it. And the second time I went back, I took my mum. And one of the things that was most cherished to me was to be able to see her reaction to Times Square and the amazing immensity of it, and the traffic and the people and all those things. So that's one thing I certainly do struggle with, I guess, with solo travel. The other thing is having, I guess, someone to kind of be your person. 2 years ago, I was in Myanmar and I had an incident where a monkey escaped from the zoo and attacked me on the street. And it sounds almost laughable, but it was quite a serious incident. And I was on my own. I was going for my Sunday morning walk. It was beautiful sunshine, but it was 40 degrees. So there was no locals about. No one was about at all. So I had been attacked by this monkey. I was profusely bleeding. I was quite badly attacked on the legs. And these 2 people popped up and threw me in a taxi and sent me off to the hospital. But at the hospital, they were sort of saying, you need your person, you need someone to go and get the medication for you to be able for us to treat you. But I didn't have a person because I was traveling solo. And so that was a real challenge, in that they were saying, well, don't you have someone to ring? Don't you have family? Don't you have friends or anything like that? So that was certainly a challenge. So after a lot of time waiting and getting a nurse to go across the road and get some medication and all of those type of things, I ended up flying straight home and having some surgery. And yeah, but a person at those kind of times is probably quite handy.
Yes, absolutely. It is kind of like a metaphor for life as well, isn't it? Like, this is why I really believe in solo traveling, is because all the lessons you actually learn are very relevant to how you live your actual real life in everyday things that you do, the values that you have, and everything else that goes with what you become and how you serve people around you. Now, this other question, again, for you, it's probably going to be 1,000,001 stories. So I'm almost afraid to ask you this, but what is one experience that you've heard, one travel experience that you have heard that has changed you or had a huge impact in your life, that has, made a bit of a difference, that you don't think things the same way you did before, or you don't do things the same way you did before, and so forth.
Oh wow, yeah, that is that's a big question. Um, I I think seeing people's circumstance, and for example, I was traveling in India, and of course, you see all different levels of poverty there, and the joy that those people still have, though, and the happiness that they have, and they are still happy and positive, and enjoying life as they know it. So I think one of those big lessons when you see things like that is to be grateful, and very, very grateful for what you have, and the life that you have, and the friendships and the support network and everything and that we have in our country and in our life. So that's certainly something.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think
Sorry, go
there's also that open-mindedness, and that willingness to be open, and put yourself in maybe a uncomfortable, I guess, position. I think that's something that I've certainly learnt from travel. You know, you put yourself in that situation where you sort of think, oh, I wouldn't normally do this, but let's try it. And usually it always has a positive outcome.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So the very last question before we finish our conversation today is,
Mhm,
if someone is thinking of going on a solo trip or starting their very first solo trip journey, because I know once
mhm.
they go the first time, they get what we're going to try. So what
Yeah.
would your advice, or tips or insights be for this person?
Yeah. I think I would firstly say maybe start small. A lot of people think that they need to go on this sort of epic eat, pray, love kind of long journey that takes them so far out of their comfort zone that almost it's a bit too much. I think I would say start small, know where you're going and why you're going there, and what you want to do when you're there, the things that you want to see and experience. Know when you feel where you feel your thresholds kind of are, what you're comfortable doing and what you're not comfortable doing. Some people are not comfortable eating alone, so think about maybe booking some dinner experiences so you're not forcing yourself into that uncomfortable situation that could cause you some anxiety of having to eat alone. Or if you're not confident driving in another country or something like that, organize day trips so that you're not in that position that you're going to be uncomfortable. Research, plan, talk to people, follow people like yourself so that you can see what other people have done in solo travel. There's a lot of information out there now about solo traveling, and there's always someone that you'll meet up with along the way, that if you get into the situation where you're really not enjoying it, there's a bar, or there's a youth hostel, or there's an activity or a walking group or a group tour that you can join, where you'll meet many travelers who I'm sure will be willing to spend some time with you. So there's lots of
Absolutely.
tips for solo travelers.
Absolutely. I love how you said that know your limitations. That's extremely important. And
Hmm.
start small. Start small, because there is always space to get bigger. And the more you
That's right.
get more comfortable in your skin, the more you can go bigger and better and stronger and everything else. And
Yeah.
just like you said, I totally agree with this information, that if you are jumping out of your comfort zone and you get anxiety, do take advantage of these little tours that you can do, which makes it so much easy and so much fun. And also you meet people and you get to
Mm.
experience the little things in life that we normally kind of miss because we didn't make the effort to go into that tour environment, like doing a dinner tour or food tasting or wine tasting in any city anywhere. It's an amazing experience, and you are not, even though you are traveling alone, you're not alone in that experience. So that gives you a really good umbrella and that and feeling of that you're supported and you're in a comfort of other people as well. So that's an amazing advice. Thank you for that, Danielle. And thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your story and all the insights. Obviously, you know, a lot of things we learn as we travel, and the idea of this video and this channel is to inspire and help and educate everybody on this. So thank you very much. And we will be doing a lot more interviews with other people, so stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.